10 dimensions. Now, I say 10 dimensions. We're actually going to start with the first dimension, and we're going to move from the first dimension, and then we're going to discuss other dimensions and how they work and so forth. You know, a lot of times you hear people talking about 3D, 4D, 5D, and so forth. So we want to discuss this. I've been kind of pondering this for a few weeks, and I said, you know what, let me just decide to go on and jump into it, and hopefully you'll begin to understand how these various dimensions work, and then how you can utilize the dimensions in order to create the life that you desire or step into an alternate universe or alternate dimension. So, like I said, we're going to be talking about the 10 dimensions and how this stuff works. And what I want to do is once you kind of get this basic understanding of how dimensions work and so forth, then we can start using our mind to create, as it were, parallel universes. You know, sometimes we find the one that we're in is not always conducive to what it is that we want to be, do, or have. So maybe a slight shift in consciousness will allow you to change that reality. And the goal ultimately is as you think you are, you have, you do, you be. You shouldn't go about changing somebody else's reality. Now, can we influence people? Absolutely. You know, and influence them for something positive? Absolutely. But our goal shouldn't be solely to manipulate other people. The goal should be, what do I want to see in my world? And if that happens to benefit other people, then so be it. But, you know, because what we call that other thing is we start dealing with witchcraft and sorcery and so forth when we're trying to manipulate and manage other people. So won't stay there. I just want to kind of touch on that briefly. Let's go ahead and start talking about the various dimensions and how they look. So first dimension, everybody, we all talk about the 3D. And so what does this really mean? We'll talk about this briefly as we go through the different dimensions. The first dimension is a picture this. You know, you've all seen stick figures. You know, matter of fact, when most of us start drawing early on in grade school, first thing we do is a stick figure. Now, that stick figure can only move backwards and forward. It's linear. It can't move side to side. It can go backwards and forwards, and it can't go up and down. Excuse me. So that's 1D. Now you add another dimension to it. Now you have 2D. Now imagine this. You got a flat square. That flat square is on a two-dimensional plane. Now that character, that square, can move forwards and backwards, side to side. And this is why we say length, width, then we got height. So again, since I've kind of given that away, now we're going to be going into the height. Now understand, the two-dimensional can't move up and down. And so when you add the 3D, this is why we call it 3D. When we're talking about 3D, it's, how many of you have been in a movie theater and you had those 3D glasses on? Now, normally when you're watching a film, you see it in 2D. You see them moving back and forward and so forth. But they're still on a flat surface. So we kind of make it 3D in our mind. But when we put on those 3D glasses, it changes the whole dynamics. I remember as a kid, they used to have these little boxes, and the boxes had like a blue lens on it and a red lens, and they were square, and you would stick these slides down into the box. And so you start clicking the box, and it would take you through this reel of slides. It may have had like 12 to 16 different panels on, and each panel had a different picture, but you were seeing these pictures now in 3D, and I thought it was just the most awesome thing in the world. The 3D glasses, absolutely. So we would see those little, you click the box and it would rotate a picture. You click the box again. And so it had these different, so whatever they were selling at the time. So let's say that it was Cat in a Hat. I'm just making something up because it wasn't Cat in a Hat. What you would do is go through these clips of Cat in a Hat in 3D. Now, it couldn't move because, of course, we were only operating out of 3D. So the one thing that 3D, a good example of 3D would be a hologram. Now, many of us seen Star Trek and various movies and so forth. Those 3D images were pretty much, even though it was like, Kal-El, you know, Superman's family was talking to him and they would say, Kal-El, you're meant to do great things, and you would see this 3D hologram of Superman's family talking to him. And then, of course, they would put the um, chip back into the little frame. And of course, he would get all this downloaded information. Now we step into what we call 4D, fourth dimensional. The difference between, you got, so 3D, height, length, width. That's 3D. So you're basically moving the character. Like I said, you got a comic strip. First, you're seeing it just simply one panel at a time. You know, you're seeing the comic strip and you're kind of going and reading the comic strip. Then you move into, like I said, you move into the 2D. You get a little more animation, but again, it's still on a flat surface. Then, of course, what you get from that point is 3D. So now you got a 3D hologram, or what we would call a cube, for example. That would be a good example of a 3D. Now we add the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension is time. So you've taken that 3D image, that hologram, for example. Now that hologram has become an AI robot, for example. It's stepped off the page. You're seeing this thing move. You're seeing it's no longer just stuck to the hologram. It's interacting in your world. It can jump up and down. It can move side to side. It can move back and forward. It's operating in the realm called time. Now, I'll give you an example. For anybody that's witnessed a parade, normally when we're watching the parade, when you're in the crowd, you can only see the events of the parade as they pass you by. When you get into something like an aerial, let's say a blimp, you could actually see the start to the finish of the parade. So you could see the stuff that's coming and you can see the stuff that's already happened. You have a 4D dimension of that parade. And when we step outside this realm we call time, then we begin to see the beginning and the end. We realize that time is a theoretical construct, and we use time as a means of measurement in order to understand this thing that's happening in the 3D. But the truth of the matter is, no matter what moment of time that you're in, it's always now. You can't do something really tomorrow. You can only do something. You can't have really done something yesterday. You really can only do everything that you do in the moment or the present of now. And this is why it's important. You know, a lot of times we start forecasting about who it is that we want to be, do, or have, or we start forecasting lack, loss, and limitation, what we don't have. And when you're doing that, you're braining all of that. Let's use another example. When you're looking at childhood trauma, for example, or past experiences that didn't go well, when you're thinking about that with feelings and emotions, at that moment, your body, your physical system is experiencing that event in that present moment. And this is why Neville often told us to go back to revise. I often say, imagine from your past and remember from your future. Go into your future. Remember Michael J. Fox and Back to the Future. Go into, if hypothetically you got into a time machine. In this time machine, it allowed you to go back to the past and change certain events. Like I said, Michael J. Fox's Back to the Future. Or you were able to go into the future, see some things and disrupt some things in the future, know how they're going to turn out, come back to the present and say, listen, that's not the reality I want. This is the benefit of living from the end. When you decide who it is that you're going to be, do, or have, what it is that you're going to manifest in your life, the kind of person that you want to be. Some people, I know that Jack Canfield did it, I know other people did it, they would have these workshops. And in the workshop, one of the things that they would have them do, and I know it's going to sound morbid, bear with me, they would have people write their obituary. And the reason for that was, once, let me give you a story based around that. There was a gentleman, and in his time, he was known for what we call weapons of mass destruction. It was the equivalent of that time, probably 100 plus years back. And he died. I feel like Paul Harvey. And the rest of the story, for anybody that knows Paul Harvey, but he died. And when he died, the newspaper wrote an article, and they said, such and such, such and such, known for creating weapons of mass destruction. And they weren't like our level of mass destruction weapons, but they were the equivalent of his time. What happened was, he read the newspaper article. Now you're like, Coach, you said he died. Well, they thought that he had died. In all actuality, it was his brother who died. But they wrote the obituary in the article about him because, again, they thought it was him that died. And he read that article. So this is going back to the obituary. He read the article and he said to himself, this is not how I want to be remembered. Now, you would know the gentleman today because there's something called the Nobel Peace Prize. Well, he started that. And today he has a legacy of peace. And, looking at people who bring creative changes and dynamics into the world. So there's all these Nobel Peace Prizes that are passed out. But that was because of Mr. Nobel. He read an article that the newspaper thought was about him, but it was in fact about his brother, who wasn't into weapons or anything like that. He was just happened to be his brother, but they thought it was him. So now why do I say this to you? You can go into your future and you can write your ideal obituary, what you want people to say about you, what you want to be remembered for. Come back to your present and start living from that ideal self. Now you say, well, Coach, what's the benefit of that? You're imagining, you're remembering from your future. The benefit is when you start imagining that consistently and persistently, your subconscious mind is designed in such a way that since it can't tell the difference between an imagined reality, and we'll touch on that in the fifth dimension, it can't tell the difference between an imagined reality and one that you're actually experiencing. When you're dreaming, for example, and let's say that you're having a nightmare or that you're having a very good dream, whatever that is for you, your body will go through the sensations of whatever you're experiencing at that moment. Often I'll watch, one of my dogs sleep, and I can tell at any given moment when she's having a nightmare because, well, I can also tell when she's barking at somebody because she's like, "Roo, roo," in her dream. "Roo." So she's barking at somebody. For her at that moment, it's real. Likewise with us. When we're in the dream and we're running for our lives, our heart is palpitating and, we got the adrenaline going on. We got the flight and fight. All of that stuff at that moment for us in our body, in our physical system is real. So this is the benefit of imagining. Again, this is fifth dimension more so what I'm talking about because you're taking your fourth dimension, height, width, length, time, and you're now translating that into the realm of the imagination. And this is the fifth dimension. So as you begin to imagine, again, I talk about this hologram called reality all the time. As you begin to imagine or outpicture on this hologram called reality, subconscious mind, your physical system, your body dynamics, and so forth will go about to seek that reality in your physical system, and it will begin to look for the evidence of that reality. So it's like somebody coming to the channel and they say, well, this stuff is a bunch of crock. The only thing that a person can see that sees this stuff as a bunch of crock is this stuff being a bunch of crock. And there's sometimes when I write those long paragraphs back to those people and you're like on my YouTube channel, I'm not really doing it for them. I'm doing it for those people who are really trying to get an understanding because see, if I just left it at it's a bunch of crock, then the person that didn't know any better would read and say, Coach didn't really address it, so I guess it's a bunch of crock. So I try to address it not so much for the person that's a non-believer, but for the person who's seeking understanding. And so I'm giving, and again, this is my perspective. You can take on any perspective, just like the person that says this stuff is a bunch of crap. The wonderful thing about this universe, it's so powerful that universe, God, source, infinite intelligence says, be it done unto you as you believe. So for the person that says this stuff is a bunch of crock, they're only going to see the evidence that this stuff is a bunch of crock. So this is why it's so important to be mindful of what it is that you're giving your attention to, because let's say that you're giving your attention to lack. Then the only thing that you can see, and a lot of times we don't even know that we're giving our attention to lack because the programming has been so embellished inside our physical system, our mind, our body, our spirit, that let's say the moment somebody starts talking about prosperity, all of a sudden you turn off. It's funny because the second I did it, somebody dropped off. Maybe they dropped off by accident. What I'm trying to get you to see, though, is the nature of the programming. When you've been conditioned by ideologies that tell you that money's evil, that rich people are bad, and you hear me say, oh, abundance, prosperity, money, oh, here he go again. He talking because you've been conditioned. Now, had you grown up in an environment and you were told that money's neutral, and depending upon what value you're offering is going to determine money, as far as its representation, is only a measure of value of services that we're offering. A lot of times people want to manifest money, but they want to do it without offering any value. And so, and of course, people say, oh, you can get something for nothing. And so they go about with this something for nothing, but you got to understand nature, in its very nature, abhors, dislikes, goes to fill a void. So because of that, ancient text says, give and it shall be given to you. Because we're energy systems, we think that we can hold the energy of lack and manifest abundance. It can't happen. You can't hold the energy of hate and manifest proper loving relationships. You can't hold the energy of illness and think that miraculously you're going to get healed. Now, let me say this. You may get healed, but because you're holding the energy of illness, to him, her who has, more shall be given. To him, her who has not, even that which they have, because it's dynamics. It's you being a vibrational being. And if you're not, I don't care what anybody tells you, and don't even believe it because I'm telling you. Test it for yourselves. Think about what it is that you think about consistently and persistently on a daily basis, and then notice what keeps showing up in your world. Vibrate. Say, start talking to yourself about lack, for example. And I'm going to tell you to switch it around also. I don't want you to stay there. But think about just lack for a moment. And just think, how poor I am, how hard times are. Just think about that conversation for a whole day. And watch what consistently shows up in your world. Don't believe anything. Often people will come on the channel and they'll say, well, Neville said, and I love Neville Goddard. I love Mr. Lindo. I love Joseph Murphy. I love Esther Hicks. I love all these great teachers. But many of us are quoting them, but we're not living them. So we can quote all the great teachers, but somebody shows up and they say, well, Neville says blah, blah, blah. And I will inquire, but what was your experience? What did you find to be true? We can quote all the Neville we want, but if we're not living out and practicing the principles, and I say this often, so you guys that know me, lifestyle will always reflect what it is that we truly believe. Neville tells people to go into the silence, to start using their imagination, and people will do it for a few moments or they'll do it for a few days, and then they'll say, this stuff doesn't work. It absolutely does work, but it's working to your disadvantage because your belief system says this stuff doesn't work. Now, you say, well, coach, that's just a catch, and you're using that catch so that it's a catch. It's not that. Life can only present to you what you believe predominantly. That's it. And listen, I'm telling you, don't take my word for this stuff. Don't take Neville's word for this. Don't take Mr. Lindell's word for this. Don't take Dr. Joseph Murphy or Joe Dispenza or whomever it is that you're listening to. The next YouTube sensation, Mr. Beast. I don't care who they are. Test these things for yourself. It's an easy test. You can simply start your day and think about what it is that you want to show up in your day, the kind of day that you want it to be. And you start living, good to see you, sister. You can start living from that day and watch what you start experiencing. Thank you. Watch what you start experiencing throughout that day. Guys, I know you're waiting on me to jump in the fifth dimension. I've actually kind of started at fifth dimension, but give me a second because we need to cover the sixth, the seventh, and the eighth, and the ninth, and the 10th. So, fifth dimension. Again, you see the Twilight Zone or Outer Limits for those. And for those who are too young to remember that, you can go to Fire Stick, or I'm sorry, Roku, or I'm sure YouTube, and look up Twilight Zone. The dimension that you're seeing right now, your screen, they get into this field. What you're seeing on your screen is not real. We're going to take you into a multiple dimension, blah, blah, blah. It's the from 1D through 4D. So height, width, length, time. Now we step into the imagination. So this is what most people don't want you to know about. When they were creating the curriculum for the school system, they said, well, do we want to teach them how to think? And Mr. Rockefeller, who was a major contributor, said, no, I don't want them to think. I want them to work. School is really not given to teach you to think analytically. They don't teach you how to be financially well, as it were. They don't teach you how to be entrepreneurs, because the goal still is for you to get a job, work on somebody's assembly line, and no matter how glamorous that assembly line is, it's still the same mindset. It's the same to get used. In school, you had a question, you would raise your hand. You don't question authority. Matter of fact, if you question authority, they start labeling you early on as a troublemaker. The funny thing is, many of those people that stepped outside the proverbial box of the school system, those were the people that excelled. And I'm not saying like the kids that were shooting people and things like that. I'm saying those who thought outside the proverbial box. Sometimes you'll get in a classroom a person that continues to ask certain questions. She doesn't just buy it because the textbook says it or the teacher says it. And because they question, then, like I said, the educational system says this person's a challenge to teach, or they try to put them on some type of drugs or whatever, because they haven't learned how to test their genius. See, we give an IQ test, but that IQ test is based off of certain criteria that the school system wants you to fall in. So as long as you're operating within that, and people's genius transcend that. There's people that are geniuses that the school IQ system can't test because of the level of genius. What I'm saying to you is the system has been set up so that you get into this space, you become a cog in the wheel. I can almost say that we're, for lack of a better word, we're human cattle of sort. We basically are used for certain people's whatever. So we work their companies. We do all the things that they may not want to do. It They dumb us down. I was trying not to use that word, Violet. If you really want to get a good picture of it, please go again and look at the movie The Matrix. Now, yes, we're not on these machines, but we're connected to machines they call computers, smartphones, TVs, televisions, and they're always programming us. It amazes me how when I'm talking to someone and I'm saying, historically, that's not how that works. And they say, well, no, I saw it on, and they'll tell me the platform that they saw it on. And because they saw it on a particular platform, it's like they say, I stopped thinking because it must be so. And we don't go about to find out for ourselves if these things are true. This is why I say, don't believe me, believe Mr. Lindell, don't believe Neville or anybody else. Test these things for yourself to find out if they're true. Because if you come to me and say, well, Neville said, okay, but what have you discovered? That's going to be my question to you. And I may even say, forget Neville for a moment. Sometimes people, they take that personally. Neville would have said, forget. Neville always wanted you to have your own personal experience. Many of us have turned Neville into a warship. So he's become our new savior. And he says, listen, I don't want you to cross yourself and get down on your knees and worship me. He said, I want you to discover the divine for yourself. And that's our goal. My goal, even with my own religious preference, my goal is not to tell you or anyone else what to believe, but simply this, that you believe. And according to as you believe, you will have, do, and be. And it can't be otherwise. Belief controls, dictates your reality. Believe it or not. It does. And even if you don't believe it, that belief system will give you evidence. Oh, no, this is not true because, the government did that. The president did that. My wife did that. My husband did that. My children did that. And we'll keep looking on the without for the reason why our lives are miserable. And we'll fail to look within. And for those people that may be listening for the first time, when we say that you're God's, we're not saying that you're the supreme being. We're saying that you're connected with the supreme being or the allness known as God, energy, life force, whatever you call that infinite intelligence. And because you're connected, you have the same abilities. I'm going to say many of the same. You have the same abilities as this infinite source. So it says that in the beginning, this is not a Bible lesson. This is a spirituality, how your body, mind, spirit works lesson. It said in the beginning, God said, let us create man, woman in our image, in our likeness. So we discover at that time, God spoke, and it was so. In another place, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. When you put out your words, matter of fact, Scripture says it this way, that you will even give an account for every idle word. But understand this, your words are creative. It says, command me herewith. Command me concerning the works of my hand. You do that by what it is you're projecting. And understand this, prayer. It's not solely you getting on your knees and getting into a posture. That's not prayer. Master Teacher says that we will give an account even for every idle word. So even idle words are prayers. We're told pray ceaselessly, without end, and you're doing so. Whatever you're holding in vibration, that thought that you're consistently thinking about, money's hard for me to come into, times are hard, that becomes the prayer. Life, everything always works out for me. That becomes the prayer. There are no good men, no good women out there. That becomes the prayer. I've come that you might have life and that you might have it more abundantly. That becomes the prayer. Absolutely. Even if perceptually, we're told not to judge according to appearance, but even perceptually, let's say that you're going through hard times. You say, Coach, how do I change it? you change it by doing something that's almost childlike in nature. You change it by simply changing your imagination about the situation. Now, you can't just do this one time. Those who know, the top 1%, whatever you want to call them, whether that be athletics, whether that be money, they know that you have to imagine consistently and persistently. We get into, let's say, the Neville Goddard community, and Neville was one of the greatest practitioners of this stuff. And somehow we think that Neville, and he told stories about his father and Victor and so forth, just thought something one time, and all of a sudden it was in his subconscious mind. A lot of times when let me say what the master teacher says. He says, do it 70 times 7. So until it's completed. Absolutely. You got to make it a habit. So you got to start thinking on a daily basis, I'm abundant. You don't think, you start there, a state akin to sleep just before going to bed. But you got to do it throughout the day. And many people think that they can think negative thoughts all through the day, get into a state akin to sleep just before going to bed because, Neville said that you only got to do it before you go to bed. And so they go to bed and they're thinking positive thoughts, positive thought, I'm living in the end. And then they have a nightmare and they're like, what the hell's that? Why did I have a nightmare? Because throughout the day, you were watching drama, craziness, you're scrolling and you're watching all this stuff that doesn't serve you. And subconscious mind says, oh, I'm going to give them more of what it is that they've been focusing on all throughout the day. See, you program your subconscious mind certainly with feelings, certainly with emotions, certainly with affirmations, but you also do it by way of what you're imagining throughout the day. And so, as Violet was saying, you got to develop a higher expansive consciousness. But what nobody wants to do in Christendom, in law of attraction, in law of assumption, now there's a few, so let me make an exception. I'm not saying nobody. I mean, most people don't want to do is I'm not going to be able to read all that's just too much. You got to give me a sentence or two because it's already gone away. I was trying to read it, but give me a sentence or two so I can see it, and then you can send more sentences or two, and then I can do it that way. But if you send me a whole block of text, they give me literally about a second and a half, if that, and it's gone. So if you want to resend that, just send me less, please. Okay. But what happens is substances to our, absolutely. Understanding, speaking of substance, we think that substance is the tangible stuff. It says that belief, faith, is the substance of things hoped for. So whatever you're imagining, you're going to direct that on the holograph called reality, and then it's going to begin to show up in what we call this physical reality. But the substance, the real stuff, is always in belief. I know that sounds crazy, but whatever you're holding as your predominant beliefs, that's what's going to consistently, persistently show up in your life, in your world. Master teacher said it this way: you shall know a tree by its fruits. The fruits is what we call reality, or the effect, or life. Life is always the byproduct of what the tree is transmitting. Master teacher says, when you sow that thought, some's going to give 20, 30, 40, 100-fold harvest. Some's going to fall on rocky ground, where times and trouble, and people talk you out of it. This is why he said, when you're on your way to your materialization, your manifestation, let's say it the right way, your healing, tell no man. When you're on your way to your manifestation, tell nobody, because he knew that if you told somebody on the way to the manifestation of creating that multi-million-dollar business, getting in that loving relationship, improving your health, you'll be talked out and say, I don't see the results. There was a young lady, Hillier, I want to say Regina Hillier. You see her on a lot of Mind Valley and so forth. When she was broke, busted, and disgusted, only had a few cents in her pocket, she had this boyfriend. And this is going back to tell no one onto the way to your manifestation. She tells the story. She had this boyfriend, and he knew that she was getting into the mindset of manifestation, how she manifested and so forth. And every time he would come home from work, he's like, "Did you manifest that $1 million yet?" Needless to say, she had to drop him. And so sometimes when you drop some unnecessary baggage called people, what happens is it opens up the possibility. Sometimes you got to stop having certain conversations with people because those conversations are keeping you broke, busted, and disgusted. And sometimes you can tell people, listen, I don't want to have those conversations no more. And no matter what you tell them, they keep bringing the same conversations to you. So sometimes you have to release them and pray that they begin to have their own personal revelations. But a lot of time, people, they're scared of you having your breakthrough because then it says to them, what am I not doing that I can have my own breakthrough? So it's easier to sabotage you to keep you from having, so that they can say, oh, they're just like me. And I was walking one day, and I'll get back to the sixth dimension. Again, fifth dimension, the fifth dimension. The fifth dimension is, for those who, when I just said that I was thinking about a group as a kid, for those who know, they know. And you can go on to YouTube and pull up the fifth dimension, beautiful music. But so I was basically, I lost my train of thought running my mouth. But the whole point is, you have to be mindful of who it is that you're sharing, what it is that the divine is doing through you. Because, like I said, because they can't see it for themselves. And a lot of times, this is family, this is loved ones. You'll get to a place that you'll discover what it is that you can say to an individual and what you can't say. Once you discover, I had this happen recently, and then I'll get into it. I had this recently. I was talking to somebody, and I knew their mindset, but I thought that I could share something with them, and they could not receive it. So I had to make a mental note and say, okay, I just can't share that with them because they're not at a place to receive it. Master Teacher says, don't cast your pearls before swine. That's just really saying that. You can't, it's not to call a person a swine. It's basically making a distinction. There's people that just aren't at a place of your level of understanding. And this is why he said, when you're on the way to your healing or your manifestation, tell no one, especially someone that can't receive what it is. But you'll discover quickly, you'll share something with them, and they're like, okay, here they go, that magical thinking again. And this is what the family members used to say about Neville when Neville would come home. Neville's always been a dreamer, So he had to be mindful, even when he was talking to his siblings, what he shared with them. He knew that he could share certain things with Victor because Victor understood manifestation. Now, Neville's manifestation was pertaining to the law of the mind, and so Victor's was in business. Today, Victor's ideal has become literally $1 billion business. Now, the Goddard business is well worth $1 million, and I think that happened about 2020 or so, but it's worth $1 billion. My whole point to you is, one, and Neville's vision is transforming lives still today. What about you? Okay, sixth dimension. This is alternate universes. This is when we start talking about slipping into time, and where you're in a meditative state. And right now that I feel like I'm sitting in this dimension, but I'm going to slip into time. I'm going to go into another dimension in my mind. Understand this. When you're in that other dimension, your spirit, your soul is not confined to this vehicle called a body. No more that when you're asleep, you're teleporting. You're in another dimension, and you often cover multiple dimensions in your sleep state. But now in the sixth dimension, the laws are pretty much the same. So the timeline may differ. You may be able to step into a new timeline, but the laws of the sixth dimension, as you're using imagination and so forth, those things are pretty much the same. What if, for example, we're talking about the Big Bang. What if that happens slightly differently, but the same physics, the same stars, the same planets, but that's the sixth dimension. So you're just in an alternate, absolutely. A lot of times, most people think that She was talking about when we're in a sleep state that we're, in our consciousness and we're operating from that plane. Most people think that things that happen when we're awake. The most powerful things that happen when you sleep. And so much so that through ancient texts, it says that I speak to them in visions and in dreams. So, and even when you look through scripture, again, Genesis to Revelation is your story. It's just a psychological drama. When I'm going to say this, and I know that some people are going to take it the wrong way, you have to plug your I am, because see, there's only God. So when in scripture it says that I am this, I'm the only God, I'm the only creator, you at that moment receive that it's talking about you. See, most people, we've been programmed, and I stress the word program, to believe that when the divine is speaking in scripture, and you, Paul said, don't you know that you're my epistle, you're my Bible? You're the Bible still being written. Your story is the Bible still being written. Okay, when you're reading scripture and it says that I do all things, you got to realize that that infinite intelligence known as God resides within you. So it's speaking also about you. And again, religious folks are not going to get this, but you guys that know. And a lot of times you guys are looking for Neville's promise experience, but many of you have had promise experiences. But because it didn't look like Neville's didn't have the child or whatever you believe that it should have had, you wake up and you say, God never speaks to me. I don't mean to say that, laughingly. What I'm trying to tell you is God is always speaking to you. You have to get to the place that you start receiving. Somebody said listening is receiving. Thank you, sis. You got to get to the place where you're receiving what God is saying to you. The funny thing is, there was a little boy by the name of Samuel, and his caretaker was called Eli. And so Samuel, Spirit of God spoke to Samuel. Now, Samuel had never heard God speak. So uh, said Samuel, and Samuel ran into Eli, said, my Lord, did you call? Did you speak? He said, boy, I didn't call you, going back to sleep. This happened like 3 times. The third time, Eli, being a wise minister, even though he was in a backslidden state, he and his sons were in rebellion. But he says, next time you hear the voice, say, speak, Lord, your servant is listening. I want to say to you, next time you get that aha moment, next time you get that, like, where did that come from moment, say, speak, Lord, your servant is listening. And we're not talking about some God out there. I'm speaking to you to speak to the God within, because that's really where Samuel heard the voice. He heard it within his own being. And what we're told about God, we keep thinking that God spoke uniquely to them. No, he speaks just like he speaks to you. But most of us, one of the things that will make you so much more powerful when we're talking about entering into these dimensions is you practicing the subtle art of going into the silence, meditation, whatever, you getting silent. This does so much for you. But I promise you, you're going to start hearing things. Many of us that knew our parents or even caretakers and whatever, when they called our names, we knew that it was them. When God starts speaking to you, as God will start speaking to you, you're going to know that God's speaking to you. And it's not going to be something, God always comes from a place of love. If it's condemnation and so forth, all that's ego. If it's saying you should have and you should do this, all that's ego. God's going to come to you lovingly. If it comes with condemnation and hellfire, all that's ego. That's man's programming to keep them having control over you. We're told God is love. And as Mr. Linder will often say, absolute loves absolutely. All that other stuff, that's programming. I'm almost use the BS word. Listen, guys, the divine spirit in you comes from a place of love. Comes from, what's up, Marcus? Comes from a place of love. When you start, and you're going to know, Marcus knows, certain things that he's been told to do, go out and be great. He goes out and he's great in schools or wherever he's at. What I'm saying to you, when you hear that voice, you're going to know it. And just keep listening. And again, you're going to get the other voice. You're going to get, if you be the son of God, if you be the daughter of God, cast yourself down. All those things are already yours. You don't have to fight. You just need to receive them. I come that you might have life and that you might have life more abundantly. Let's go into the seventh dimension. So, sixth dimension, same type of stars, moons, but the events may happen differently. And see, you can step into these dimensions, and you can go back and listen to the different dimensions as we talk, but you can step into these dimensions and start changing things. Neville called that revisioning. You can step into different timelines, come back as somebody else. And let me say this before I move forward to the seventh dimension. We think that you're doing that anyway. The question was, is it possible to manifest, living multiple lives at one time? There was a movie years ago with Jet Li, and it was called The One. And Jet Li was like bouncing from these various dimensions, fighting himself, coming in contact with himself in these multiple dimensions. The reason why we operate from this one is primarily because this is the one that we're most familiar with. And, Mr. Linder, when I went to his home, we spent some time together. On his door leading into his office, it was called Heaven. So I went out to the store, and I came back from the store, and I spoke with his wife. She said, he's in heaven. I bring that up, though, because he says, when I'm there, I'm not here. And he says, he becomes like a little child. And he says, man, I can just experience all this stuff. And he says, I don't even have to leave this place. I go there, and he's time traveling. He's going to other dimensions, out of body experiences and so forth. And he's in heaven. So that sign upon his door is absolutely true. Now, because his wife comes from a Catholicism background, most of his family thinks he's crazy. And this is why I talk to so many people, and they say, Marcus, you got to give me like one sentence and bounce off of that, because I'm not going to be able to get all that. But I appreciate you. They only give me like a second, if that, to read it, and it's gone. So by the time I would start reading it and straining my eyes and so forth, it's gone. So if you can give me like a sentence or whatever, or shorten it, then I can look at it and I can address that. Absolutely. My sister was just saying her new mantra, I'm in heaven. Absolutely. And we're told, he says this often, Mr. Lindo, we're told to bring heaven on earth. But let me make this point before I go into the seventh dimension. People come and they say, well, I just want everybody to be awakened. And that's a nice thought. But the truth of the matter is, it's very rare that the mass, it says, many are called, but the chosen are few. And this is why any of us that are on this call, for example, if we got one or two people in our family that we can talk about this stuff, we're the exception. Normally, it's just us, and then we find a community of other people that, oh man, the most wonderful thing that I discovered when I started on this journey, and listening to Neville and Louise Hay and all these different people, was to come in contact with real people and realize I'm not crazy. Now, to the world outside, we are. And this is why I don't try to, until a person is awakened, they're not going to be able to receive. So I don't try to convince them. Like I said, if I'm writing a long note on my YouTube channel page, it's for those who are becoming awake. But it's really not for the person that doesn't understand. I just happen to be addressing them. But It's for you, in short. And so Mr. Linder would often say, in his home, they write him off, and because most people just can't receive spiritual things because it has to be spiritually discerned. But let me go into seventh dimension. So in the sixth dimension, everything kind of functions the same, but you can have a different setup. You can have a different Big Bang. You can have a creation story. You can have a different variation of that story. So the wonderful thing about being able to go into these different dimensions is, and you're doing it by way of your imagination, but don't tell yourself, because this is going to be the temptation of ego. That was just my imagination. It was just my imagination. No, I'm joking. But it's more than just your imagination. Somebody clicked out when I started singing. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can get the first part of it. Mark, tell you the story. My little brother sat in the next window and said, "I got to your little brother sitting in the window because you didn't hear what I said. You got to give me less." But um, literally, give me the next sentence after your little brother sitting next to the window. Okay, but let's go on and get into the seventh dimension. Your imagination. It's not just your imagination once again running away from you. It's your imagination being creative. Faith, belief is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. The substance is in the belief. Then it's the belief is the seed. I need you to get that. The belief is the seed. Then it's germinated in reality and it gives birth to harvest. The belief is the seed. Okay. Seventh dimension, different physical laws. So now we imagine the universe and where gravity works upside down. So when you kind of plant your feet on the ground, you bounce up and it's different. The sky may be green and the grass may be blue. It's a different, the laws of nature in your former reality, whereas the laws in the nature in the sixth dimension were still the same. There was just a different story being told. This one, the laws of nature change. So the light may be different. You may see colors in the seventh dimension that did not exist ever, that you've never seen before. So the seventh dimension starts to change the dynamics of the physical reality. So we're going to go into the eighth dimension. The eighth dimension is all possible universes with possible physical realities, and they can be organized in different ways. So absolutely, I love that. The brother says that, Marcus says that in his dreams, the people in the dreams never believe that he's in a dream. But you know what? The people in this dream, it is a dream. No matter how vivid it may be, it is a dream. And this, when we're talking about this thing about we've gotten so affixed to this dream, though, and we spend, 30, 70, 80, 90, 100 years in this dream. So we think that it's real and we think that it's fixed. I want to give you something about this dream. Think about this. How many times have you knew that you knew that you knew that you knew, and you know that you don't have dementia, and you know that you're not dealing with Alzheimer's, and you know that, but you knew that you set your keys in a particular place, and you found those keys elsewhere? It's because your reality isn't fixed. See, we've been programmed to believe that it's fixed, but sometimes, and the people that show you the most of this are people dealing with like Alzheimer's, dementia. They start seeing, because the blinders come off. There was a movie years ago, and I can't remember the name, but if somebody remembers the name, you can bounce it up and I'll call it out so they can go out and see it. But what would happen is these guys, they would be walking around, and I want to say Keith David was one of the guys, black actor Keith David, and a white guy, big old buffy white guy. And what would happen is they would, first of all, everybody looked the same until they would put on sunglasses. They would put on sunglasses and they could see who the aliens were. I believe that this is what happens when you start dealing with children, pets, and people who become childlike again, who are dealing with dementia, Alzheimer's. The blinders that we have, being normal, being sane, as we call it. And there's certain people who are very intuitive. Now, Christians call them witches and all the same because that's how we've been programmed. You guys have so many gifts that have been stifled, shut down through religion. ESP. We hear that stuff in the Christian circle. Oh, that's devil, that's Satan. No, that's who you are. But the religious leaders wanted to control you. And they knew that if you were tapping into your sixth sense, your seventh sense, and all these various senses, that you would see things beyond the natural. And those, I put up a video about Helen Hadsell. She was a wonderful woman. She was winning all these contests. And when she was younger, she was able, her third eye was open. And so her grandfather was about to pass, and her mom said, well, the angels are about ready to come and get him. And she says, Mom, now she's like 5 or 6 years old. She's like, Mom, I gotta be in there. I gotta see the angels coming. I gotta see the angels coming. Understand this. Ancient text says this. It says, often we entertain angels unaware. The angels' wings didn't come into play until about like the 6th century. Prior to that, man didn't decide if angels had wings or not. What I'm saying to you is that often, if you're not being the angel in someone else's life, you're often entertaining angels unaware. And what do I mean by that? Often the divine is using you as a messenger or somebody else, and the divine is just using your physical apparatus called a body to speak that message to that person that they need at that time. I reached out to a person on a particular day and said certain things to her, nothing bad. She was a friend. And she says, I didn't realize the guy was using me. I had no clue that the guy was using me. Man, you used me. Anyway, her friend had died. I said something to her, didn't even have any clue why I was saying it, because it was just something I was led to say to her. She says that my friend used to say that he passed on this particular day and he used you as a vehicle to give me that message. One day I'm in a library and I'm speaking to a lady and this stuff is just pouring out of me. I don't know the lady, but this stuff is just pouring out of me. And she says, are you an angel? I said, I am today. I said, but if you talk to my wife, you'll get a different story. What I'm saying to you is sometimes the divine, often the divine is using you unaware. Okay, so in the 7th dimension, things start to shift. Now, the 8th dimension, this is like all possible laws and possibilities, all forms of nature, they start changing. You'll enter into worlds that you didn't even know existed, because it says that in that time, it hasn't even entered into the imagination all the things that the divine has for them. We can't even imagine. You're going to enter into universes and so forth that you're going to come back and literally people are going to say, this guy's insane, she's insane. Because the stuff that you're going to be taught, the stuff you're going to be told at a physical reality level, people are just not going to understand it. But let me go back to Helen's story because it was so important. Entertaining angels. So Helen says, please, please, please let me be in there when grandfather is picked up by the angels. So his spirit leaves the body. And she sees these men come in, and her grandfather, as she knew him, his spirit is leaving with these men. So she's about ready. She's a little kid. So she's like, Mom, there's not angel. There's these old men. And Mom said, shh, shh, shh. Her mom often would silence her in the name of religion about her gift. So for years, Helen's Hadsell's gift was stifled because her mom was a religious person and believed because we've been indoctrinated, oh, that's work of the devil. That was the church keeping us stifled. ESP and all these things is our third eye, us being able to see. That person calling and say, I was just thinking about you. That's how we operate as spiritual beings. We're supposed to be doing healing. We're supposed to be doing miracles. Miracles are supposed to be our natural state of existence. But we've been so programmed that we think that only a special person can come to the earth and only he, she can do miracles and nobody else can. A friend of mine told me about her aunt. I was in California at the time, and she was saying that her aunt was ill. Now, I just listened, I didn't say anything. And when she left, I saw her aunt feeling better because she was saying that she was in a really bad place. And I saw her feeling better in my imagination, and I just released it. Funny thing was, a couple of days later, the friend came and she says, "Did you pray for my aunt?" I said, "I did." I said, "But how'd you know?" She said, "Because she started doing better." And I don't know how she made the association with me because she could have just started doing better, but I did. What I'm saying to you, your mind is so powerful. You can send it out to, you can transcend the universe. You can go to galaxies, whatever. And this is the multiple levels of the, absolutely. Marcus was just saying that, many people are equipped with telekinesis and all these other gifts, and they're using, and we look at those people and we see them as the exception. But we all have gifts. Now, we haven't tuned into those gifts. We haven't exercised. They're like muscles of sort. Going into the silence is like a muscle. All this stuff that we're doing is like a muscle. And the more you exercise the muscle of imagination, the more you start sending out vibes of healing, the more you start saying, "Oh, I'm reading people's mind." Thank you. Love you. Appreciate you. Uh, thank you. They was talking about my books and they were greeting me and sending me love. Appreciate you. All of these things, when you do in your imagination, you start exercising them. This is why Mr. Lindell says over and over, "Good to see you. Thank you." Mr. Lindell says over and over, "Go into the silence, go into the closet." Sometimes he says, "Shut your mouth." Whatever. You can go in and use your imagination. Start thinking about what it is that you want. Sometimes I'll take a scripture or a word or an ideal or a concept into the silence. I don't always come out with the answer, but what happens is then as I go on about my day, that thing that I was seeking, it may be weeks later, maybe monthly, or I may be given a scripture or a video comes up, but the answer that I was seeking shows up. Guys, you're so much more powerful than you know. But let's see if we can go into the ninth dimension and we'll shut down the 10th dimension. So the ninth dimension is all possible structures of law, all possible. So, the laws that we practice, we say, well, law of attraction, it comes up with new laws. Laws that you didn't even think existed are in the ninth dimension. You will start operating at one point. A person being able to do a heart transplant was thought impossible. A person thought to do the 4-minute mile was impossible. A person, making a certain amount of money, whatever. When you start transcending what other people say is possible, and you start entering in, as it were, from the ninth dimension, all things become possible. It says, I can do all things through the divine anointing, Christ's Spirit. That's not some religious thing. It's called anointing, Christo, and it's in you. When you operate from Genesis to Revelation, I say it's your story. I don't care what your belief system is. It's a psychological drama. What is telling you how your mind, your body works. A lot of these things, when we start talking about the 33 years of Jesus, talking about your vertebral, your spine, when it talks about the Golgotha and the sun rising, it's talking about your imagination in the skull. It calls it the skull. It calls it the cranium. It tells you what it is, but we think that it was a skull, a cave that looked like a skull. It's talking about you. When you go into the Old Testament, it's talking about the holies of holies. It's talking about the different levels of who you are, body, soul, spirit. When it's talking about the ark, again, it's talking about the different levels of who you are. All these stories are talking about you. So when I say that you're God's, I'm not saying that you're the supreme being, but I'm saying that he loved you so much that he left you a transcript of how you work. You find many people, especially in the Jewish community, no matter what you believe about Jews or whatever, and anybody else that takes scripture and they start applying the principles, and somebody says, how did you come into all this wealth? How did you do this? I said, I just went through the Bible. only thing you need to know about the Bible is as you think you are. And that God so loved the world that he loved you. And God is love. And he's called you. When we're operating from a place of less than love, we're giving our power away. You're less powerful when you're operating from hate, vengeance, condemnation. Your energy field. And all these things tear about your energy field. Now, because you don't see it, you don't know that it's being distorted. Only thing that you know that my body's not feeling good. And then all of a sudden, you know that sickness and disease starts ushering in. When you start operating from your true nature, which is love, a lot of stuff that you're dealing with is going to be dispelled. It's going to go away. But you've been holding that negative energy for so long that it's become a poison to your vibrational system. And ancient text says, forgive, let it go, release it. It's not about the other person. It's not about the person that did something to you. It's about freeing you. You're freeing yourself from bondage. It says, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Heaven agrees with you. Whatever you loose on earth, heaven agrees with you. 10th dimension. 10th dimension. 10th dimension is everything. This is the collection of all the possible existence, universes, timelines, realities beyond this, and there's nothing to add. This is the whole kit and caboodle. Everything you can think of, anything you could imagine, this is you operating out of the 10th dimension. Guys, I know that I gave you a lot. I kind of went over my time. I thank you for bearing with me. For those who missed the talk, you can go back and just listen to the various dimensions and so forth. When I say that you're God's, what I'm saying is that you're connected to the source of the all that's known as God. It doesn't matter your religious persuasion, your belief system. It says in him, her, it. We live, we move, we have our existence. This is not a religious lesson. You have life force in you because right now you're watching this video. And those who watch the video later on, if you're watching the video, somebody asked the question, what's the best way to build faith? You do fitness, Marcus, so I'm going to ask you, what's the best way to build your muscles? The same thing about building your faith is simply exercising it and exercising it and exercising it. Start acting on what it is that you know to do, what Spirit has told you to do. The more you occupy and exercise belief, let's make it simple, belief, you're going to start seeing the benefit. Don't make faith this religious thing. It's not that. You're religious. Do you not know that you're standing on holy ground? The ground is not holy because of the ground that you're standing on. It's holy because you're standing on it. The place that you're standing on is holy ground. When you understand that I and Father, infinite intelligence, Mother, Source, God are one, and you start operating, living from that, and you start treating people from that place of love, you're operating true faith. It says that God is spirit, and those who worship God must do so in spirit and truth. God is love. So when we operate from a place of love, we're operating from our true identity. Guys, I love you. I appreciate you. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Go and get in some of those dimensions. And don't write it off because you think to yourself, this is only my imagination. Once again, running away from me. Okay, I'm singing Temptations. I'm sorry. Love you guys. Appreciate you. Talk to you next week.